What's going on, guys? Coach Aaron here, and today we're talking about the fundamental of dive tanks, as well as later in the video we're going to look at some examples to understand the concepts in game and how we can actually apply it. Now, the first thing to consider is, how does a dive tank take space? Well, a dive tank takes space by using their mobility and their burst damage to kill squishies and get out with their life. Or, if they don't need to get out, look for more opportunities for kills. But you can't just jump right into the enemy team, so what should you consider when you're looking for a dive? The first thing to consider is the target that you're selecting. So when you select a target, there's a couple of things that you should consider. The first thing you should consider is the target a squishy? Now, typically, diving a squishy is going to give you much better results than diving a tank. But that doesn't mean that every single squishy you dive is a good target. And this leads me to the next thing. Is the target out of position, or are they in a position where they are posing a threat to your team? So for example, if you see a squishy isolated from your team, then you should go and dive them. Or if you see a squishy in a good position to be a threat to your team, like for example a soldier on high ground, then you should dive them. But there's one more thing to consider. Is your team in a position to follow up with you? Now, this does not mean that your team needs to shoot the person that you're diving. It means, is your team actively helping you in the fight? Now, if your team is in spawn and you dive the perfectly correct target, odds are that you're just gonna die. So, just to recap, is the target squishy? Are they out of position or in a position to threaten your team? And is your team in a position to participate in a team fight when you commit to the dive? Now I'd like to look at some examples to make sure that the concept is understood fully and to show you the nuance with the guideline, because these are just guidelines and they won't answer every single situation. But let's take a look at some examples so that we can understand it much better and we can figure out how to actually apply it in our own games. All right, the first example I want to look at is right here. I'm going to let it play out, and then I'm going to look at it as an overhead view, and we're going to talk about if it checks all three of the rules of the dive and see if it was a good dive.
Wait for it.
Okay, so we get the kill on the Ana, right? So now let's go back. Let's see if it was a good dive. All right, number one. Is Ana, the target that we try to dive, a squishy target? Yes. Okay. Number two. Are they out of position, isolated, or in a position that is threatening to our team? Yes. In this case, they are out of position and isolated, right? Now, number three. Is our team following up? And remember, team follow-up does not mean that they have to shoot the same target you're diving. They don't have to shoot Ana, but look, Soldier's shooting someone, Kiriko and Lucio are healing, and Symmetra is trying to go on a flank. So it checks all three boxes. The only problem that this dive encounter had was the fact that they got slept. But we ended up still getting the kill, and I think it was a well-intentioned dive. The only thing I would say to do better is to play around the sleep dart. So if we look it over again, goes to the dive, and we end up getting the kill. Boom. That is a fairly textbook good dive. All right, here's another example of a dive that I want to look at. The same match. Let's see what happens. I'm going to let it play, and then we can talk about it. Okay, so if we go back, what we see is that one, is the target that we dive a squishy? Zen is obviously a squishy. Now, number two, are they out of position or in a position that is threatening to your team? This Zenyatta is very out of position. The entire team is in there. He's not. He's isolated, and we can kill him. Now, number three, is there follow-up from the team? Now, your team is actively engaged in a fight. Kiriko is healing. Your Lucio, your Symmetra, and your Soldier are all shooting at main. So I think this is a wonderful dive. That is a great example of a pretty solid textbook dive. And it works out because we followed these rules. We go in, we get the kill on Zen, and it works out. So let's watch it again. The only mistake we make here is by using too many cooldowns, but we don't need them to get out. But again, that's just micro on Doomfist. All right, let's look at one last example of a really good dive, and then we're going to look at other examples that are exceptions to the rules. So we can talk about how there's nuance to these rules. You don't always have to follow every single rule. So this dive, let's just watch it play, and then we'll talk about it.
Meteor strike.
Okay, so if we talk about it, what was good about this dive? Number one, was our target a squishy? We went on this Anna, correct? Anna is a squishy. Okay, Anna is who we want to get on. Now, number two, were they isolated? I mean, you tell me. This looks isolated to me, right? Now, number three, is there follow-up with our team? I believe that our team is actively engaged. Now, right now they're around the corner, but all they have to do is go like this and start shooting. On top of that, you know, Anna is low, so there's other factors that play into it, but I think this is a fairly good dive, and that's why it worked out. All right, now we're going to look at a dive that is breaking the third rule, but it's an exception, and we'll talk about why. So again, I'm just going to let it play out, and then we can talk about it. Okay, so now he goes to drop down, and other stuff happens, but let's talk about why this was a good dive. The first thing was, obviously, one, are they a squishy target? Now, Junkrat is a squishy target, okay? Now, number two, are they out of position or in a position that is dangerous for your team? Now, this Junkrat is on high ground, which is a pretty dangerous position for him to be in, right? He can do a lot of damage from high ground, so we want to control high ground from the enemy team. We don't want them to play here. So, we dive them, right? Because they are in a good position that is harmful to our team, okay? Now, number three, this is where we break the rule. Is our team in a position to follow up? Not really, okay? Now, Cass is in, but Lucio, Kiriko, and Soldier are all not in. Now, the reason that you're allowed to break this rule here is because up here, you're not going to die up here. You have cover, okay? So you get the Junkrat off, you force him off, and then you play your life. And the reason that that is okay, like the reason that you can break rule 3 is because you're safe. If you can safely dive a position without the help of your team, do it. Now, if the Junkrat was way back here and you tried to dive here without the help of your team, the entire team is going to look at you, you're going to die immediately. So this is a case that I really found when I was doing the coaching session that I felt like it was a good exception to rule number 3, where you don't necessarily need the follow-up because all you're doing really is if you got the kill, great, but mostly he's just here to take this high ground. And what's funny is what we watch is now that we have control of high ground, if we watch our soldier, he's able to do this for free. You see what I'm saying? We have the high ground control for free. Now, we dropped and that is what it is, but that visor is able to go off because we have control of the high ground. So that's another part of diving. But I think that was a good exception to the rule. Number 3, is your team following up? Not necessarily, but we could dive up here safely without being in danger. All right, here's another example. This is me playing, and I'm moving over to Winston because I realized I had a lot of Doomfist examples, and these rules apply with every dive tank. It doesn't matter who you're playing, they all apply. So let's look at, here's another exception of me breaking rule number 3, which is the team following up? So let's just watch it, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's look at it. Let's go through the checklist. 1. Rule number 1, is the target I'm diving a squishy? Okay, Cassidy is a squishy. Rule number 2, are they out of position or are they in a position that is dangerous to my team? Cass is not out of position, but he is in a position that is dangerous to my team. If Cass is allowed to play here, he will shoot my team from high ground and they will die as long as he hits his shots, right? So I need to make sure that I push him out of this space. Now, here's a little nuance with rule number 2, okay? If Cass is playing over here, and this could be like rule number 4. I didn't really talk about it because I want to keep it simple, but rule number 4 could be, are they in reach? So if Cass is right here, and I want to dive from here, that is too far of a dive, correct? So when someone that I want to get on is out of reach, I need to be smart. I have to dive here first. Okay, well, that is just ball of light. I have to dive to this high ground first, and then to this high ground, or path some other way. Dive, maybe walk through here, then go here, or I can walk this way, right? So you have to be thinking, if there's no targets that are within range, you're going to have to use your pathing. But that's just a little side note, a little extra commentary to think about when you guys are diving. But again, 1, is he a squishy? Yes. 2, is he in a position that is dangerous to my team or out of position? Yes. 2.5, we can say, is he within reach? Yes. And then 3, is my team following up? In this scenario, they're not really in a position to follow up, but I know that I can break that rule because diving here, I'm not going to die. I have bubble, I can escape if I need to, and like you saw when I took some damage, I dropped down, got healed up, and then went back up. Okay, so that's another example of a exception, a dive with the breaking the rule number 3 for the exceptions. I hope these examples gave you a little bit of a better understanding and will help you apply the concepts to the game. This concept goes fairly deep, but this guide should get you at least thinking about your dives more. Due to the game having just so many complex situations with different heroes, maps, and situations, I can't really tell you the answer to everything. However, this guide should get you on the right track on how to approach a dive with a dive tank. Also, although the fundamentals of diving is the same for every dive tank, remember that every dive tank has a different kit that equips them for a different scenario. So if you're playing Winston and you dived the perfect target, but you didn't have bubble, you're probably just going to die. If you're playing Doom and you used all your cooldowns on diving the right target, you might die because you just have no escape abilities. So, although you know the fundamentals of dive tanks, you still need to learn the micro with your dive hero and how to use their kit the best. So, I hope this video gave you some useful information for your next comp match. Dive on that like, sub, and share button for me. It really helps me out and only takes a few seconds for you. Also, remember, a better you is a better gamer is a better world. Coach Aaron out.